3, 2, 1. We are live.
Excellent.
Excellent.
What?
Excellent.
So I only just said one word and you're falling around in fits of laughter. What's the problem with you? You'll be on the happy pills again.
It just sounded, I don't know.
Oh, right, good.
Excellent.
Pull yourself together. Do our listeners really want to listen to you just having fits of laughter just because I said the word excellent?
It just reminded me, I had an image of like old-timey Victorian some person say, "Oh, excellent."
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm glad you just projected me back to the 1920s.
Anyway, splendid.
Super.
How are you?
Well, I was fine up until about 5 minutes ago.
You mean you were excellent?
Yes.
Yes.
Are we actually going to do anything today, or are you just going to...
We have serious matters to discuss. So
Serious.
stop cackling.
Yes, I'm actually not cackling. I don't know why you're asking me to stop. I think you're the one that needs to stop. So what are these serious matters then?
Well, I wanted to... You weren't involved in last week's episode.
I was excluded.
Yes. So I was wanting to get your commentary, your opinion, your thoughts, because maybe the listeners missed your point of view, your thoughts, your voice.
What made you think I listened to it? No, I did listen to it. So you want my thoughts on what you did last week?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought it was a welcome change from a listener's perspective, to hear a group of people, women talking rather than just us two droning on about something. And obviously the topic was highly important, highly relevant. In some respects, I actually found it quite disturbing. Listening to it, both as a father and a male, in that you and your friends raise some, very important issues, and issues which we don't talk about enough as a society, I think. We tend to bury these things, and particularly listening to you and your friends talk about sexual harassment quite openly, and your views of that and your experiences of that, I think was very illuminating, and something which men, to a certain extent, should feel rather ashamed of.
Yeah.
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 Well, and have you thought about it subsequently? I mean, have you had conversations with your friends about it after having done it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that kind of came out of it, even after talking, after filming the episode, was kind of saying, it's strange how many, even if we're friends, we all have stories that even we don't know. I didn't know some stuff that happened to my friends, and
Oh, you mean
vice
that came
versa.
out during the conversation?
Yeah.
Right.
So I feel like it sparked a lot of conversations and sharing stories, remembering stories.
Do you think you'll talk about it perhaps more openly now as a result? And
maybe. I think one of the things we realised, which is quite shocking, was that a lot of the things we didn't even know were harassment until recent years. if that makes sense. So
yeah, it doesn't, and that harassment, arguably is socially defined. So you're harassed if you feel harassed. The point is that the same thing could happen to two different people, and one might feel uncomfortable about it and another not. So in that sense, the boundaries are fluid, perhaps.
Yeah, possibly.
And I think it's really important to say right from the start. I mean, I was listening to it. You asked me, what I felt listening to it, and I said, well, I was listening to it from the point of view as a father and obviously as a male. I think it's important to say right from the start that although you raised some very important issues, sexual harassment is not all about men harassing women. Men can get sexually harassed, both by other men. Boys can, in particular, can get sexually harassed by other men, and men can get sexually harassed by females. And that's not in any way to undermine, the important issues that you talked about. I just felt that sexual harassment isn't entirely one way. I mean, statistically, probably the majority is all about men imposing themselves on women, which is clearly inappropriate. But of course, it does happen the other way as well sometimes. And I think it's just important to say that.
Yeah, I mean, we did briefly say that, but
I may have missed that.
Didn't focus on it.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that you should focus on it, because by definition you don't have any experiences of male harassment.
No,
sorry, of males being harassed as such.
And if not that, I would say, I think it just raises the issue again. I mean, I don't know the statistics, but is it safe to assume that men are mainly harassed by men?
I really don't know. I to be honest, I don't think there are many statistics on this. And excuse me, bit of a throb in the throat. Sorry about that, listeners. I think one of the problems is because people just simply do not wish to talk about this, having been harassed, whether they're male or female. You mentioned earlier on how you learnt things for the first time about things that had happened to your close female friends, which is just illustrative of the fact that even when you're close to somebody, you don't say, "Oh gosh, you know what happened to me the other day," or whatever. You tend not to talk about these things, and particularly people tend not to talk about things that happened in their childhood, possibly because they're still processing it for years to come. They're potentially ashamed of it. They wonder whether it's something that they did wrong.
Yeah, but so many stories, simply take the stories that have come out about young boys being molested by
Absolutely, and
priests.
That's the whole point, and they come out years and years later.
Yeah, of course, but that's just an indication. So I think, again, it would kind of be safe to assume that most men are also assaulted by men.
It may be the case. All I'm saying is that I've not seen, but then I've not particularly looked for any clear statistical evidence from it. I just don't think we know enough. That's the whole point. And we don't know enough about, for example, domestic violence. We know that women are insulted physically and mentally within relations, whether they're married or otherwise. But we don't really have any notion of the incident rate, if you see what I mean. Because these things very often go unreported, or certainly underreported. I've known cases myself where domestic violence has taken place, and the woman in question has clearly not wanted to report it. And there's a danger that even when it is reported, it's not taken seriously, or the police actually can do very little about it. And again, sorry, just it's not to suggest that all domestic violence is women being treated inappropriately by men. It can happen the other way, particularly mental bullying, if you see what I mean, mental harassment.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing.
No.
But
this
just
is
think
not a disagreement at all. I'm just saying
it's
the
not
danger
the
is that
topic.
we only, with this topic, we only ever see the tip of the iceberg. It really is a societal problem. And
yeah, but if you're saying that, if we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg and the current statistic is 97%, then...
Well, I don't know where that statistic came from. And
from the UN.
Well, yeah, but on what basis is it?
I don't know. That's for you to look into. Yeah. You're the science person.
Right.
But I think the problem is, what I think, I may be over-generating here, but I think women tend to be very sympathetic to things like this happening to men also, but then there isn't always the same kind of sympathy from men towards women.
No, I completely agree. There isn't.
So if you say to me, it happens to men, I'll say, yes, I agree, and that's a terrible issue. Whereas other men, if I tell them, this is a problem and we need to talk about it, they'll say, well, I haven't harassed anyone, it's not my problem.
But it is. It's all of our problems to a certain extent. In that it's a societal problem. Men have to, and yes, the majority of sexual harassment, the perpetrators are men. I think, even if we don't have clear statistics on that, I think we can stick with that generalization. And so men have to hold their hand up, and they have to. I think you made some very good points with you and your friends when you were discussing it last week, in that men have to take responsibility here, and the conversation has to not just be amongst women, but it has to include men, because men need to also, I can't remember the phrase that you used, but they have to stand up and say to their male colleagues, no, mate, this isn't good enough. You can't act like that. That's not appropriate. Yeah, call them out.
Or even just have the kind of discussion, or because I do wonder sometimes, say it's a night out kind of instance, or, at a pub or something. As we said, like, as girls, we have this kind of thing where we always know who's left with who's going home how has said person left. Like, we all know, I don't know, we have this kind of looking out for each other.
Yeah.
And I kind of think if guys were there with people, surely there's signs of behaviour that they can see in their mates, or stories their mates tell them, or I don't know. Do you get what I mean? And it just seems that
yes, I mean,
people tend to ignore these kind of things, rather than being like, actually, that doesn't sound quite good. That sounds a bit fishy, or you shouldn't really be bragging about this. It sounds like it wasn't consensual, or that's not okay. Like a kind of response, because I think a lot of it is,
particularly I think with young men, there's a real danger, because this is all about male bravado.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of
where
it is
inappropriate behaviour is somehow applauded.
Yeah, it's this kind of toxic masculinity of trying to seem masculine and do these things, and it's the kind of peer group that reinforces them. If the peer group doesn't reinforce them, or the family or whoever, then gradually this will have to stop, which is why I very much believe that this is where men, because I don't think, as much as women talk about it and we discuss and make these conversations, I don't think much will change until men take responsibility of...
Well, they've got to take some ownership of it. And
yeah.
this is a problem of which we are a fundamental part, and but how you get them to do so, I think we're completely agreed that men have to stand up and own the problem. But how we get them to do that, I just simply don't know. And I'm saying that as a man, somebody who has been a teenage and 20-year-old man. I don't believe I acted inappropriately when I was. Perhaps I did, and without really understanding what was going on in my female friends' minds. But certainly, it was interesting what you were saying about looking after one another. And when I was at university, I actually lived with 3 other women, and so we would often all go out together. And we, I as their flatmate, would look out for them. We would all kind of look out for one another to a certain extent. And equally, if one of them was getting, shall we say, chatty, we'd have certain signals. So if one of them wanted to bail out of a chat up or whatever,
you give a look, and then someone comes
they would
along.
give a kind of certain look that we understood, and I would go and intervene. And drag them away.
I mean, I think everyone has that, but I don't know. It's the problem of when it gets out of hand, when people get too aggressive and too this, where, I don't think as a woman you should always have to have people around you, have to have that kind of friendship group always there to feel safe that, someone will bail you out.
No, absolutely.
Should I not be allowed to go to an event alone just because I feel unsafe that some man will come and try to chat me up and do this and do that?
Of course you should have the freedom to feel safe.
So I think it's just conversations that have to be had between men. I think we need to pass the baton and they need to talk about it. That's what I think.
Well, I think you're right, because I think unless I've talked about ownership and responsibility, and part of that process, I think, is first of all is acknowledgement, and you can't have that without men probably talking to other men about whether they acknowledge that some of the things that they may do would be deemed inappropriate by others.
Yeah, I think there has to be some better education about what harassment is.
Well,
and how
you're absolutely right, but part of the problem, I think, is a kind of this laddish culture where they may know that it's inappropriate, but their friends, the people they consider to be their friends, their peer group, thinks, it's a laugh, isn't it? Oh, you mean you touched her ass? Oh, that was funny.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not funny.
Yeah.
And it's being...
I think it's just being even that one guy to say, that's not funny.
Yeah.
You just need one guy to gradually start, speaking up. Yeah. And then maybe gradually it'll kind of fizzle out. But I think not a lot of men.
We need some role models.
Yeah, I think not a lot of guys are not strong enough, but maybe...
No, I think you're right.
I think it's difficult.
They are. They don't want to look weak in front of what they see as their male peer group.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to be non-conforming, if that makes sense.
But that's true of men and women.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think it's the same in any kind of friendship group. I think everyone.
And I think it's particularly with a certain age. When you're finding your feet as an adolescent, as a young 20-year-old, you're very sometimes obsessed by not your you could be your physical appearance, but also your kind of you want to be accepted. You want to be part of the gang.
So especially if it's a new group. But I'd say if you disagree with what your friends are doing, then it's better to find a different. There's so many people on the planet. You'll find a better group of friends. So just speak up for what you believe in. And
that's true, but some people think it's sometimes cool, to be in with a certain group. And history is littered with examples. It's Romeo and Juliet, West Side Story, which is another version of Romeo and Juliet. Greece, which is another version yet again of which gang, which is it cool to be in this gang or is it cool to be in that gang? And it's all about this, growing up and uncertainty about your own identity and who you want to associate with and who you want to be seen with.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if this education happens in schools, but I just think. I personally, I don't know if it's just me at the moment, after having so many discussions, I just feel tired of being that person making these discussions all the time. And I think women do feel tired.
Well, particularly if you don't see any progress. If you felt that something was happening as a result of having these debates, having these discussions, then you might think, well, the discussion is worthwhile. But if all it's doing is just like a storm going around the valley, then yes, of course it's tired. It's tiring because you feel that, how many times do I need to talk about this before somebody actually takes any notice?
I think maybe the point is we need to talk more with guys, I would say. Because I'm not sure how effective it is just women talking.
Well, what would be interesting, this is probably beyond the range or scope of our podcasts, where we're going a little bit off piece between a father talking to his daughter, vice versa. Just like you got a group of 20-something women together, it'd be interesting to get a group of 20-something boys together and get them to discuss the same issue and just see what they have to say about it.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to do that. Maybe I should.
Maybe we should try and do it.
Yeah. If you're listening to this and you would be interested to that, reach out and I might do the same. I read something which was kind of saying, if you want to feel how women feel or have a fear of feeling when we're out, they kind of said, explain as a heterosexual male why you don't want to go to a gay club.
I think I lost the plot on that.
So they're kind of saying how a lot of straight men wouldn't feel comfortable going into a gay club.
Really?
And they'll say, it's because, I don't want men looking at me or touching me. And that's whereas women feel much safer in a gay club.
Well, because there isn't the... they're less likely to get harassed.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they were kind of saying. They were saying, so you feel unsafe in a gay club because you think you'll get harassed. It was kind of that kind of sense of, and that's how women feel, majority of the time when there's men around.
Again, I'm generalising. My assumption is that a number of heterosexual male feel uncomfortable because, I don't know, it somehow threatens or challenges their masculinity.
Yeah,
or
possibly.
At least that's the way they perceive it.
But that's how they perceive it. It's not to say, I'm not saying that they will necessarily get harassed in a gay club. I'm just saying that I think it's kind of a insight into that uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. That women experience daily. So it's just that kind of, what makes you uncomfortable is exactly how I feel all the time.
But, I don't feel uncomfortable by it.
Yeah, maybe you, but I'm just saying in general, someone that might come up with an excuse as to why they wouldn't want to go.
Yeah. And actually, when I was at university, I actually used to go to a gay pub in London, in Hampstead, just because it was just like really, really, it's just so interesting. I mean, I wasn't gay, I wasn't interested in other men whatsoever, but there were just some really interesting characters, really interesting people there. I was curiously interested in it, but without being gay.
Well, maybe you just had fun.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
precisely.
nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
And I got chatted up quite a number of times, actually. But, well, wasn't particularly interested. Well, I wasn't interested at all. But certainly I wasn't threatened by it. I actually, if anything, the exact opposite.
But maybe that's just the way you are, or you've been raised. Like, you have a sister, I don't know.
I don't know.
But as I said, maybe you didn't feel quite as insecure because of the way you grew up, the friendships you had, etc., etc. Whereas other men wouldn't necessarily feel. As I said, I think a lot of men will say they feel unsafe without having been.
No, absolutely. They just.
So I'm just
what
kind
they're
of
scared
saying.
of is, I think, it's the idea. They've never been in a gay club
the
in their
idea
life.
of being objectified, and it's just exactly what a woman would experience.
And the irony is that most of those men who maybe have fear of being objectified, as you put it, the chances are that they're not gonna. I don't know.
No one's going to be interested in you anyway.
Precisely.
So
That's what I'm trying to say in a polite way.
Yeah. So.
Sorry, and the other thing that occurred to me, and so I should say this in relation to what I was saying earlier on. I was possibly incorrectly giving the impression that this is all a problem about young males, in their teenage years, in their 20s. Peer pressure, male identity. No, sexual harassment goes through the life cycle.
I think there's a lot of older men, actually.
Absolutely, that's the point.
If you take in the accounts of pedophilia and young
that's
kids.
That's my point. So, and I just wanted to raise that in just case anybody.
Oh no, I would say it's a lot of old, gross men.
Absolutely.
Most of the time, if anything.
Well, I look at the phrase "dirty old man." There's almost a stereotype somehow that when you reach my age, you just become a dirty old man. Which is something that I feel particularly uncomfortable about, as though you can't be polite or.
I think it's almost like there's this kind of concept that men are just these beasts that can't control their sexual desires, which undermines them. It just makes them sound like they're hound dogs. They just can't control themselves. And I think men need to stop taking up that kind of identity.
But the trouble is, I think, for some, part of a male identity is to actually create exactly that impression.
Stupid, if you ask me. Absolutely stupid. I don't know. But yeah, I'd say it's undermining to want to present yourself as just that.
I mean, one of the things that sorry, let's just go back a bit. There are very few surveys of sexual practice, and one of the in fact the first major survey of sexual behaviour and practice was actually carried out in the last years of the Thatcher government during the 1980s. In fact, Thatcher tried to ban it. She didn't want public money spent on it, and in the end it was funded by the Wellcome Trust. But leaving all of that aside, what that first survey showed, and it's been subsequently followed up, and it relates to exactly this issue. It shows that men, almost throughout the life cycle, but particularly in younger ages, overestimate the number of sexual partners they've had, and the number of women underestimate it. So men brag about their sexual prowess, and women actually
don't want to say too much, because then they don't want to be considered
precisely. And that, I think, is one of the fundamental problems that we're talking about here, that there is these certain cultural norms that, you're not a man unless you put it about, so to speak.
Yeah. I remember this guy, we went out, and I don't even know how the conversation came to be, and he was bragging. He was like, oh yeah, I've slept with so many women, and I was like, okay, cool. And he was like, I don't want you to tell me. I was like, well, why is it okay for you to say what you've done but not okay for me? He's like, I don't want to know. I find it disgusting. I don't want to know. Because then I won't be able to be with you. I find it absolutely disgusting. And I was like, well, for that exact reason, I'm going to tell you exactly everyone and everything.
How, and where.
Yeah, because
and
I was
when.
just like, that's absolutely ridiculous. And that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
In a telephone box? No.
No, but it's that kind of stereotype of like, okay, why do you think I'll find it attractive with you bragging?
Yeah.
And yet somehow you're like, oh no, I don't want to know because it will lessen my opinion of you.
Well, as I say, we're fighting against cultural norms, and it's the cultural norms that we've got to change.
It's societal issues. So many issues are societal issues, and I think, I don't know, I just feel like it gets me quite upset when I think current governments don't seem to care, and if anything, perpetuate a lot of these ideas more, and it upsets me even more when it's women doing this kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe having discussions with men might be a bit enlightening.
So how do we conclude this? Men need to
Talk about it.
And talk about it.
Call out their friends.
And, call out their friends.
I think that's the biggest thing I could say.
And throughout ages. This is not just a teenage, adolescent, 20s problem.
Yeah, because I just think, I don't think you always need to have the worst case scenario come along, a big news story to use as an excuse to have these conversations, and then it will die down again. And it's the same now, it's the same with the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, all these stuff have always been going on, but it's somehow kind of brushed under the rug until a big media case comes along, and then we all talk about it, I think. And
then it dies down.
And then it dies down. And then
the next case comes along, and it's a big issue again.
Yeah.
Well, it's always a big issue.
Whereas it's been happening forever. It's not new. And, some may argue that it was only this big of a case because Sarah Everard was a white female or whatever. Like, there's so many stories of that haven't found any justice. And I don't know. I think people in all of these kind of things should acknowledge their privilege and have conversations, learn, educate themselves. I don't know.
And of course, there are huge cultural differences within this, and we're talking about it very much from our own experience, but of course there's huge cultural variation in terms of what's acceptable and what isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for myself, having grown up in Greece, which apparently I found out a few years ago is like really, I think, second to worst in the European countries, and like a list of gender inequality.
Yep.
Which
the land that invented democracy still haven't
and there's a lot
come
going
to grips
on
with gender equality.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on currently about sexual assault there as well, and it's just very upsetting.
But sorry, let's explore that. I know we probably ought to wind up, but can we just explore that a little bit? So given that, and given what I said about cultural differences, do you feel more unsafe going out in Greece or in the UK? As a woman in their 20s?
I don't know. Both.
So equally, you wouldn't say that
Yeah.
one is more.
I would say maybe in Greece it's more the gross old man, if that makes sense.
So in the UK you avoid
Whereas
men in
here,
their 20s, and in Greece you
yeah,
avoid
but maybe it's just the different
men in their 50s.
Maybe it's the different time frames that I've also lived in different places.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
I don't
of course,
know.
you haven't really lived in Greece as a late teenager, early 20s person.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's both, but I just think, yeah, these issues have been going on for ages, and I think a lot of people are tired of talking about them because you kind of want someone higher up to do something about it, if that makes sense.
Yes.
You want to see...
And it's not helped.
Policies or something.
I was going to say it's not helped when those who are in positions of public responsibility who are acting inappropriate anyway.
Exactly. Well, that's what I was kind of saying earlier, that it's governments that are not helping.
Well, I'm not sure I would say governments, but people
in places,
people within positions of power, shall we say.
How would, a woman who's been harassed feel when Trump was president? Someone who's been known to have several sexual assault allegations against him as president of the country.
You may be too young to remember, but of course there was all of that affair with President Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't want to discourage anyone. Maybe I'm just in that kind of mood of I've been talking about it for ages and I need a break from it. But I just highly encourage men to take the baton, because I think a lot of women get tired of talking about their experiences or reliving them, because I think it's quite exhausting for a lot of us to talk about it, because you kind of in a way relive what you're talking about, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, please talk to your friends. Please do something.
Well, there's a plea, and let's end on that plea. You've heard it all. Action is needed.
Yeah, listen to last week's episode if you haven't.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about something more cheery. I mean, these are really important issues. They're actually, you said you were getting tired about this, so we probably shouldn't go on about this again for another week. So let's turn next week
we can pick
to
it up again another time. I think it's just for me, I think currently it's just, maybe it's just me, maybe it's a lot of people. I need a bit of a break from it, if I'm being honest.
Let's talk about something uplifting next week.
A mental health break.
Something uplifting next week. So we'll talk to you all next week. Enjoy this episode.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Excellent.